hour and a half of the kind of squeaky Mario voice might be a bit much. It's a great personality and great character, but you don't usually hear long monologues in that voice.
Hi friends, welcome to the Metacast Roundtable by Naavik, and this is a one-stop podcast to stay up to date with the latest game business news and all of their insights. I'm joined by Anthony Pecorella, co-founder of Level Up Labs, Tim Mannveille, CPO at Hutch, and a new face today, Tom Kinniburgh, Web3 Gaming and Naavik core consultant. Hi Tom.
Hi, how are you, Maria?
I am good, how are you?
Yeah, really well. I definitely was a bit sick this weekend, though. I just had a cough and a cold, so coming out the other end of that, my voice might sound quite husky because of it. But yeah, I'm really excited. Been doing a lot of work on Web3 and just mobile consultancy, so been fun.
Yeah, you used to be in the free-to-play space, right? And you moved into like the Web3.
Yeah, I've sort of done a little bit of everything. Been doing mobile basically for 12 years. Most recently, actually, was working as a sort of head of product at a London studio, Pixian Games, which are working now on Web3. And then now I'm working with Naavik specifically on Web3 and blockchain, and actually with a lot of blockchains as well as gaming companies as well. So sort of expanding beyond just gaming and sort of working with blockchains directly.
Mm. And if there was one in-game animal you could choose to pet, what animal would that be?
I would pet a phoenix. I think if I could have anything, I don't need a real animal. I need something dramatic, and a fiery beast feels like the best.
Wow, that sounds very warm.
Sorry,
we're just talking about weather.
Yeah.
Anthony and Tim, it's really nice to have you here again. It's always good to catch up with you.
Good to be here.
We have a lot to touch on today. Many topics in different areas of the business and games. We're going to be talking about Riot Games acquiring Wargaming Sydney, Magic Eden, which is a Solana marketplace, making royalties optional for buyers. So we're going to dive into some of these principles of Web3. The Game Pass on Metacast that was announced last week by Meta, and we'll be diving into voice acting pay. There's been a lot of discussion going through the socials about a voice actor of Bayonetta raising concerns about pay and the unfairness, and we're also going to be roping in some discussion on the potential impacts that AI could have in this segment of the industry.
Great.
All right. Well, I'll just jump into it because I actually have the first topic, which is the Riot Games. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Wargaming was founded in 1998. I was really impressed by that because I'm only 8 years younger than Wargaming, apparently. You can calculate my age. Wait, younger or older? Anyway, let's move on from that.
Got to guess which one. Okay.
Yeah, you have to guess. And Wargaming acquired Big World that was based in Sydney in 2012 and then became Wargaming Sydney. Wargaming develops a lot of free-to-play real-time multiplayer games. If you have World of Tanks or Warships, that's from them. And they acquired Big Worlds that was developing MMO technology that was being utilized by World of Tanks. And then the acquisition happened, and now Wargaming owns the technology of Big Worlds. The Sydney studio has around 100 people and was very recently now acquired by Riot Games. The amount is undisclosed, and Riot Games in turn is owned by Tencent. And from the announcement, it sounded like the Riot team had the opportunity to work with some team members from Wargaming Sydney, maybe related to this technology of the services they provide for MMO backend services. And we'll be jumping into just thinking about, okay, why does this make sense for Wargaming and for Riot? We'll just do a quick touch on the topic so that we can dive into the wider discussion ones. Does anyone have thoughts?
It feels like a very positive outcome for all parties. Feels like a good acquisition for Riot. maybe Wargaming having a good person to sell it to. And actually for Big World, Sydney, it doesn't sound like anyone's lost their jobs, maintains basically that coherency of the studio down in Sydney, which, they've been doing it for 25 years, I believe. And there's a lot of things that have been built up there, relationships, understanding, knowledge, technology. So Riot buying into this gets a lot of that. It's probably something to do with the market, sort of bear market at the moment, making things more difficult, Wargaming feeling a little bit of pressure, and then also maybe being in a sort of different time zone in Australia with Eastern Europe could be more difficult. But overall, I imagine all parties have had a positive outcome from this.
After doing some research into wargaming, I started to understand that actually the Sydney studio is a very small slice. The 100 people out of, I estimated between 4,000, 5,500 in total across all of their studios. And also, I assume it must be hard with the fairly recent closures of their Russian Lesta studio, Wargaming Moscow and Wargaming Minsk, because of the war and sanctions. And then they opened new studios, one in Serbia and one in Poland, with full relocations of whoever wanted to move there. So I can only assume that I had quite a lot of cost. And I looked into their at least mobile games, which I'm going to make an extrapolation to their other platform games, that Russia was their country with the most downloads and the second country in terms of revenue. So with the restrictions now with platforms, I assume they're taking a hit into their revenue and their profitability. So looking at the 100-person studio, I assume it was a good deal. Wargaming keeps the rights to Big World's backend services, so there's no concern there about the maintenance of being able to use that innovation for their games. And it also, helps to support the coffers of the new games that they're developing. They're developing 2 new mobile games, and so with all of the market downturn that we discussed and having to move out of Russia, that allows them to keep financing those new games.
And Big World, sort of back in the day when it was first founded, was the biggest and best middleware for MMOs, and they've sort of built around that technology stack all this time. Their focus has always been on live ops and running huge multiplayer games, which Wargaming, everything they've been doing has founded from that, right? So over the last 10 years, I'm sure they've passed on a lot of that information. And I believe Wargaming is set up in sort of studio-led teams where each studio is focused on one game. They have sort of more of their own focuses and changes, and they get to make their own decisions. So this probably feels like a natural thing where they've got a lot out of them, and then actually Riot could still improve some of these areas, definitely with live ops. I think Riot also, they're just increasing their relevance in their main titles, like League of Legends is obviously the biggest, but they're just trying to build out their known IP with this sort of technology, and who knows, maybe an MMO is coming from League of Legends. That could be.
Well, it is coming. It is.
Okay.
So that is
well,
why does it make sense for Riot? It is essentially an acqui-hire to bolster the internal knowledge of developing an MMO. It's also to support the live service of League of Legends and Valorant. I think building MMOs is historically hard, and that know-how comes from getting that expertise and people that have gone through the motions. And I think Big Worlds supported the development of 30 or so MMOs. So I couldn't imagine a team of experts more than Big Worlds to support Riot in the League of Legends MMO that they're developing. Because there was a tweet, I think, where they put some expectations management that is still early in development. So there's some rumors about the MMO potentially being at risk, and it's going to be very hard to develop. So this could be a way to try to decrease that risk and increase the chances of delivering.
That makes sense. It's been interesting to see like Riot really kind of expanding with its League of Legends IP. I'm not a League player. I did a little bit of Dota and still don't know what's going on when I'm watching it. But like, I don't know if any of you saw Arcane on Netflix, but it's really good. And it, I think, introduced it, those characters to people who never would have, didn't need to know anything about League of Legends to enjoy it. So, they've found some really good partners to do some, high quality material with their IPs. So it makes sense that they're going to build out an MMO and continue to kind of find ways to expand what is becoming has been a really dominant IP.
And we talk on this podcast and other people when I'm not on it as well, often about the consolidation and just giant companies buying everybody. But this feels different. This is not like, Tencent bought another thing. It's like, Riot got it so that Riot can do more. I'm excited about, like, with what they're doing. I'm like, yes, bring it on, more of that. I'm interested. Similar, I'm not a League player. I liked Arcane. I'm like, yes, expand that IP, do it, reel me in, give me more things.
Yeah, I'm too late. Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, do you think, maybe we're a little bit old to start playing League of Legends, but do you think Arcane would have encouraged people to, like, the younger generation to actually pick up the game? Or do you think they tied the two together, like TV?
There's Wild Rift as well, right, on mobile. So you got another entry point there. I was actually disappointed with Wild Rift. I thought that might be a sort of more accessible way in to the whole thing. And it's like, oh no, this is still pretty crazy, actually.
Yeah, I'm just going to ring the bell again for Mobile Legends Bang Bang. And if I am 8 years younger than Wargaming Sydney, then I'm 22. So that's all fine.
Perfect audience match.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to answer the specific question, I suspect it's not going to get that many people moving from not playing League to playing League. Anyone who's going to be somewhat inclined to do that probably is well aware of it, and maybe a few people will try it out, but I think it's much more kind of going the other direction of introducing an IP to a huge audience who is completely unfamiliar with it, and that helps them build out. I mean, so while it may not lead people to playing League, it might lead more people to play the MMO if they can see these characters that they really like now available in a different genre that they weren't interested in the MOBA, but as they build this out into other genres and other platforms, and it'll probably be a movie eventually, and it just keeps kind of expanding out. We'll have a League of Legends theme park soon. I don't know.
There's a design problem there, isn't there? The League of Legends character-based roster thing, MMO. Okay, well, but hang on a minute. There's not enough characters to go around. So how is it massive? I guess it's in the universe, right? But you're not necessarily going to be that character that you saw there.
It's based on the Runeterra universe, from what I understood. So I'm sure they'll introduce new characters. And in terms of Tencent offers its own game services. So I can imagine also this acquisition of depth of knowledge in terms of doing back-end services for MMOs and multiplayer online games. I don't know how much Tencent has this crossover of knowledge, but it could also support them with their expertise. So we'll jump into the next topic, which might be spicy, might not be spicy. We'll see. Tom, what's going on with Magic Eden?
Sure. Yeah. So for those that don't know, Magic Eden is the largest NFT marketplace on Solana. And Solana in recent time has really grown into becoming sort of the number 2 area for NFTs in all of blockchain. So Ethereum is definitely still the daddy in terms of having just transaction sizes, huge, Bored Ape Yacht Club's 200,000 per sort of transaction. But where Solana sort of excelled is it's faster, cheaper, very, very cheap transactions like sub a cent. And Magic Eden was the primary marketplace. It expanded to capture over 90% of all of the sort of transactions, and that's mainly art collections, but there were some games coming through. Sort of notable new ones. There's Eternal Dragons, which is an upcoming one launched through Magic Eden. They do a sort of launch program. So all of this is going well. And in NFT land, there's basically 3 ways that people get paid. You have the fee, sort of marketplace fee, which is usually done by the provider of the marketplace. You have an idea of a royalty, which is for the creator or the builder of the NFT. There's a sort of kickback. And then you have the difference between sale price. So if I could buy something for 5 Sol and sell it for 10 Sol, then I, as the user, has made 5 sol profit. And what was interesting is that this royalty segment, although coded into an NFT, so into the smart contract that built the NFT, it didn't need at the protocol level to be applied, meaning a marketplace could ignore it. They could not pay the royalty for every sort of transaction. Now, Magic Eden had been paying royalties. It'd been following the best practices, but there was, in the last month or maybe 2 months, there were a number of other smaller up-and-coming marketplaces that just removed all fees. They got rid of their marketplace fee at 0%. They removed all royalty fees. They weren't doing the kickbacks, and it was just the sale price. Now, from a sort of user perspective, obviously, if you can buy something at 5 sol and sell it at 10 sol and pay no fees, you've definitely made more as a user. But it was a very unsustainable model. So, the most widespread one is called Hades.io, I believe. But what was interesting is just how quickly it accelerated. So from a sort of market, and we're talking in the region of sort of 40 to 100,000 transactions a day on Solana at the moment. It definitely spikes. Hades was capturing 30% of that, and it did this within a month. So from unawareness to being awareness, it's capturing a really reasonable portion, and it forced Magic. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, just like a question along the way. You said it was an unsustainable model. Like, do they have any sort of revenue, or is it just like advertising based? Or
at the moment, my understanding is Hades didn't have any direct revenue, but often the marketplaces still collect actual NFTs themselves. So say they launch a platform or new project, they'll ask for, to be given a few of the NFTs, or in promoting, they have bots that could arbitrage away. So there's ways that they can play their own system to sort of fund, but that's a murky area. I'm not exactly sure what has or hasn't been happening, but it's possible. But the most interesting thing is, for my opinion, is the defensibility here. So we had something that had a 90% market share, had a reasonable UI, UX, very great experience, good customer services, lots of people using it, the majority of users using it. And then within a month, they'd lost 30% market share to an upstart with terrible UI who just completely undercut the fees, and they had no defensibility. So this was really interesting because I sort of relate it more to like an eBay, where it's a kind of network effect dynamic where if you're eBay and you're selling, let's just say bikes, you attract people to your platform because other people are selling bikes. And if you go to the place that's selling the most bikes, then the bike buyers are also there. You can command higher prices on your bikes because everyone is looking at your service. For a competing service to compete on bikes, they need to attract all those old bikes or the sellers, and they need to attract the buyers at the same time. And it's basically quite defensible in a non-Web3 area where the overhead of importing and putting up things like bikes or whatever is quite difficult. In an NFT land, though, it's incredibly indefensible because the NFT is just a pointer, essentially. And for a marketplace to create, a section, let's call it bikes, in NFT, it only needs to read the smart contract, interpret it, and then it's created a whole storefront for that particular NFT type. And this is what Hades was doing. It was ripping all of the collections that Magic Eden was having, putting them up there, and then selling them at a discount. And users were responding. They had no allegiances, to Magic Eden. They were moving the NFTs off Magic Eden, putting them on Hades just to undercut. And so the main story revolves around Magic Eden coming out and scrapping the royalty segment. They said royalties are now optional. So if you, as a lister of an NFT, you can choose to ignore basically the royalty or pay the royalty. So this is undermining.
Sorry, Tom. This is what I didn't understand, because I thought it was the buyer. Whoever lists, if someone created an NFT, they could have a royalty attached to it, but then it's up to the buyer to decide whether they want to pay for it or not.
Well, it was usually up to the marketplace to enforce that royalty. So say on OpenSea, when you click to buy a NFT, it will say, 10 Ethereum plus 2% fee for OpenSea and 2% fee for the creator. And that was called the royalty. Now, what I didn't realize is that this is not protocol enforced, meaning
that surprised me.
Yeah, that in the NFT config, however they've been scripted, this particular section is just non-enforceable by the protocol. So the protocol won't read or listen to this idea. It's up to the marketplaces to implement it. Now, up until this point, all the marketplaces had, and there hadn't been this competitive edge. But with these high transaction volumes and Solana seeing huge numbers of like transactions basically compared to Ethereum, this undercut was a lot faster, a lot more, with no planning, just happened. And it's really showing that the users didn't care. If I thought about it, like, that's a bit like saying you don't want to pay the artists for their fees, but they just wanted the cheapest NFT. And I think that's important to understand that, like, you can't, if you're creating a new project and your business model is designed around, well, we want to take quite large royalties because, we're important. We've maybe paid Snoop Dogg to like be involved here, and that's part of this. This isn't enforceable in the layer, and very, very quickly your entire business model could be evaporated.
When you say royalties, does that include, for example, in a game economy where a game dev releases an NFT and then the game monetization is each time it's resold on the secondary marketplace, they get a percentage? Is this the royalty fees as well?
Exactly, yeah. So royalty,
wow.
because those three ideas. The fee is the marketplace charging its own fee. No matter what happens, they can charge a fee on if it gets sold. But the royalty, it can be set up in multiple ways. So 2% of all future sales could go back to any owners of an NFT, the creators of the NFT, a white label address like a trust fund. It can be quite complicated, which is a good idea because just like any business or stock or share, or it's like a dividend, for instance, it's a type of financial idea that could create some interesting outcomes, and usually is about funding and kicking back into the project. But because it's not enforced at the protocol level, it's completely redundant, as shown here. So I imagine, people are aware of this, and we'll see an upgrade to the ERC 721, which is like the classic NFT script, both on Ethereum and probably on Solana. But how they do that, I'm not technical enough to understand that. So
isn't the more surprising thing that this didn't happen sooner then?
What
is it?
I mean, it's maybe something where it's a faux pas, right? It's quite socially unacceptable to just take someone out of, I'm not going to do that. It's like not tipping at a restaurant, maybe, where...
Yeah.
It reminds me of other battles, right, which go on where usually people are hoping to secure a monopoly and be profitable in the future. So I still remember the video streaming battles of like 2007, and YouTube won because they didn't have any adverts.
Yeah.
And everybody else had adverts. So it was like, okay, yes, YouTube. And they had no adverts. And they're like, everybody gone? Great, switch on the adverts. Yeah. That's that way.
Same with like Uber, for instance, right? Take over a market, get everyone using your cars, then increase prices. It's like I can't remember what the type of capitalism is called, but yeah, that's a definite model. Interestingly, though, I always think about this. So Apple and the app stores, right? They charge their 30% fee. And you're, as a developer, in some ways inclined to pay that, right? They provide a service. They are good at what they do. They promote you. They do all the downloads and upload costs. But what's interesting about NFTs and blockchain is these services, these windows of marketplaces, they aren't the blockchain. They don't provide the back end for driving the transactions. They don't provide, the costs of funding that blockchain. They are just windows to view anything on the blockchain. And as such, they outcompete themselves very, very quickly. So it just makes it very hard to make a defensible model. one thing to think about. So I find it very interesting from the gaming's perspective, where obviously you want your NFT collection to be viewed by lots of people and spent and invested in. But because of the ease of creating these marketplaces, you're probably your best bet is to always try to make your own. Keep it yourselves, keep the revenues, keep those fees, if you can charge any at this point, because control is far more important than availability, it seems, like controlling where things are. And I think that's what Axie, and I think Steppen is another good example, where they looked at what was going in the market and very quickly responded by, we want full control. We'll make our own. We'll do our own things. So, yeah. I don't know what... I'm always quite aware that I don't know if NFT as an idea will survive. I think it will have to evolve because there's so many oddities around it. You know, for instance, even on the artist side, the image isn't really included in the NFT. You know, it's actually just a link to a PNG somewhere, which is madness. You know, you're really paying a lot of money for not actually even an encoded JPEG or anything. So
you're going to say, Anthony?
I was going to say, there really are a lot of interesting stories there. Like you, I did not realize that the creator fees were not enforceable by the smart contract itself. And it sounds like that's not the case on Ethereum or Solana or anywhere. Because I was originally thinking, this is a reason that people just abandon Solana, because they'll go as creators to whatever chain has support for enforced fees. At least as a creator, that's what I would do. The defensibility is really interesting. It feels, it's like a commodities market, right? So it's not that you're selling things that are better than someone else, or it reminds me a little bit of maybe of like travel websites. Like you go to Expedia or Travelocity, or like they're all selling the same flights. But they try to get people through advertising and name recognition, through rewards programs, through ease of search. Like, it can be very difficult to find the right flight you want. And I will pick a place that has a better user experience because I need to find the thing that I'm looking for. So I guess that'll be what they'll have to move towards, because the race to the bottom in terms of costs obviously is extremely effective. I think your point about the marketplace having so much information about the NFTs and being able to profit off of that is really interesting. Like that feels like they could easily do that because they will have a lot of that access faster than, when you're flipping NFTs and specifically looking for like, someone's listed it at, they've left a zero off their price or something, you want to find that faster than everyone else. And they'll likely be able to have a slight edge on that. This is exactly what blockchain, has been talking about. Is like, it's wide open, decentralized, anyone can do it. This is what happens. It's, and the people entering the system need to be aware of that and remember that, I respect Magic Eden and others for having paid out, just sort of out of good character or however you want to put it. You're always going to find someone who's willing to just undercut if it's possible. And now you have to find some other way of defending it. Yeah.
I wonder if there's also some behavioral psychology at play here to make that position less defensible. Because if it's a small price point and you're paying, 3-7% fee on a small price point, the value that you see you're losing, your brain might be able to process that of, this is acceptable, this is okay. But when you're buying NFTs of, 300K, just these values where when you see the amount that you're losing, it's a bit like if you look at your income statement and look at how much you're paying in taxes. It just physically hurts to see a number that big that you're losing. And then you stop caring about customer service and what the experience is like. If you can save that money, you'll go to the competitor. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was going to take a little off topic with, I find this similar to Airbnb when, you have the cleaning fee and you have the Airbnb fee and they break it out now. And it's getting to a ridiculous point. I don't know if anyone's looked on Airbnb recently. With most cleaning fees in the like $70 plus, which for me, you're renting somewhere for 2 days or something. It's ridiculous.
Well, you have to clean it as well. You have to clean it. You've got to clean and then pay for the cleaning.
So I imagine from a user experience perspective, like you're saying, Maria, about your income statement, it's it's not going to work. We're going to have to see an inclusion of any fee into the final buyer price, and then how those fees are divided up, is depending on protocol level ideas of when the thing was minted, or even just business to business relationships. We might have to go back to contracts and just being paid back directly. Unlikely in Web3. They'll work out a technical solution, but yeah, it's going to require some changes on the blockchain front.
I imagine there will be a competitive advantage potentially to the chain that does it first, because maybe the creators will move to there, just theorizing. I'm just surprised that this is not enforced at a protocol level, because wasn't it a principle of Web3 that you keep ownership of your creation and you'll always be rewarded from, starting point A, and then it's going through the community? It just feels counter to what the principle is.
It is, and I tried to dig into what that meant and why it wasn't, and I haven't been able to technically understand it. It might just be a Solana thing. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same on Ethereum. Again, though, I just know from Magic Eden that they called it out as unsolvable from the protocol level. But the final point is really interesting. So what Magic Eden then did to compete against this, and they've now got back their 90% share, is they turned off their fees. So they say, there's a sort of benefit for everyone, there's no fees. They also, made the protocol, the kickback to the creator optional. But they've now lost that revenue stream. Everything now on Magic Eden has no fees. When before they were losing some percentage, they've lost all of their income revenue. So how do they go back from 0% up to even any percentage? Even 0.5% might feel like a lot to people nowadays. So it's a bit like the race to the bottom for app stores and free to play, when we were like $5 apps and you went down to the 99 cents price point and then you went free. And no one can imagine now, if you're a reasonable mobile creator, you have to be targeting free. To make a business model on 99 cents is far more difficult, or at least very, very niche in what you're targeting. And so thus, the same might be for marketplaces now. They need to look at other revenue streams.
Well, marketplaces have existed before crypto, where you sell used goods and you can pay to be placed in the higher tier of the presentation. So
yeah, that's a good point.
There are non-crypto businesses that have achieved this, so
exactly,
I think we can take them as inspiration.
It could.
I am curious, how many people go to a crypto marketplace to browse? When you're absolutely right. When you're trying to find the best vacation, or what car you want to buy, or which couch you want to get on Facebook Marketplace, anything that you see first is going to matter. But maybe eventually that'll switch. But I just have a hard time imagining going to a marketplace and not knowing, almost like, I'm just going to buy an NFT today. Let's see which looks cool.
That's a great challenge. That's a very good challenge. Yeah. Makes sense. Does anyone else have anything to add on this topic? So where we have other deep topics.
Well, there's one tiny thing that I think it doesn't apply here, but there's one world I know of where you have optional ability to pay more, and people do it, which is this thing. I have first heard of it as a case study at a theme park where they sell you a photo of you on the ride, and they do take all the photos, and then you're like, do you want to buy one? It's like $15, and people are like, seems like quite a lot. And then they did a test where it was like, pay what you want, and that didn't work out. And then they did pay what you want, and half of it goes to charity, and that way they made more money. That was the winner. So literally pay what you want, but half of it goes to charity, and that turns it around. And then the same thing comes up kind of in the Humble Bundle, right? They sort of dove in on that. And then you get into more things like Patreon, where it's more of a relationship and like, I want to support this person. So, okay, there is an aspect of human benevolence where we will choose to pay more when we don't have to. But we're talking about a marketplace where the prices can range from $3 to $300,000 or whatever. I think there's a limit to that. I don't think that's going to work at the top end, even if you could make it work at the lower end. All right. So to come back on this, so this was actually in the Naavik newsletter, but it was widely everywhere. The MetaQuest announcements. What's the next thing? What are they doing? Now they've got legs. Okay. Now there's a Pro headset, and it's $1,500. Woof, quite a lot. Okay, but it can do all these cool things. And then there's there's this Game Pass feature in it. And that did get my attention a little bit, and then I was disappointed. But so just to go into that a little bit, so the interesting thing here, it's a little bit like what we've just been talking about, right? When you want to produce a new world, a new ecosystem of some kind, where people are creating things and consuming things and values being created for everybody all around, right? It's just a massive chicken and egg problem, because no buyers are going to come if there's no sellers, and no sellers are going to come if there's no buyers. Like we talked about the eBay for bikes, like, well, okay, if I want to buy a bike, why am I going to go to this place where there's nothing? So, okay, right away, you have to solve that. And of course, this has been done in the past in various ways, but how do you do it? And when it comes to hardware specifically, it's like, it's not just a chicken and egg problem, it's like chicken and egg and hen house, and you have to have all of these things working somehow.
Farm too.
Yeah, right. And then people who want to buy eggs, slightly stretching the metaphor too far, really, but it's kind of true. There's you need loads of things to come together. It's really, really hard. What I liked about this is it reminded me of probably the closest to the best prediction I have made. Right, I've got to big myself up here. The blog post is down, but you can still find it on archive.org. I've got to dig it out and repost it. So back in 2008, Sony had the PlayStation Move controllers, right? And 3D TVs were coming up. They were going to be a thing. And I was like, wait a minute. There's a cool thing here, actually, because you could have 3D AR games. And Sony have solved the chicken and egg problem. They've already got the hardware. The TVs are coming. They've already got the interface that you would want, because it can recognize where you are in 3D. They've got so many of the pieces already that they could just make this be a thing. And the killer app is going to be that your Move controller becomes a lightsaber in your hand. Now, of course, I was totally wrong about the 3D TVs, because the 3D doesn't work that way. It's not coming out to you in your hand. It was a vague thing in the background, so that didn't work. But, right, then along comes VR, and Beat Saber is the killer app, and I'm like, yes, that, I was kind of there. So I'm thinking about that again, right? Because, okay, here we are. Right, it's another punt at VR. What are the ways of solving this chicken and egg problem? And so the software side, right, what are you going to do? Well, okay, you can just buy studios to make the stuff for your new platform, which Meta have been doing. And then antitrust shows up and goes, hey, wait a minute, you're taking over too much of this nascent market. And arguably it's too nascent for antitrust to get involved, because it hasn't even started. Well, it has started, but anyway, that's a whole other topic. Then you've got free games and a free-to-play model, because, okay, there's lots of possibilities there. And VR chat, right, is huge and free, and there's loads of that value creation going on. So if you've got that in your headset, okay, already a bunch of content has been solved for you. There's people making it right now, and it's free for everybody. There was, by the way, this implied thing in the way they presented that the reason the headset has to be expensive is because people are getting all the value out of these free games, which Meta doesn't see any of the revenue of. So they wanted to make revenue from the headset. They didn't say that directly, but it's what it sounded like, which seemed kind of weird to try at this stage. Anyway, but then what I'd never thought of before is there's a third way, which is like, what about subscriptions? What if there's a subscription for games somebody already has, and you go, and you can also play those games on this new bit of hardware. So right away, some of that chicken and egg problem's gone away. It's like, I could buy this, and there's already things I could do on it, so it could make sense. In that way, genius. The disappointing part is that, well, no, but they're not VR games. You're playing it on a virtual screen. And like the Meta Quest Pro headset, it's like a step up in a lot of ways. I think it's still not like virtual screens are cooler than real screens. Not yet. So that was, a bit of a downer on that idea. But I'm still quite excited by how much they're bundling it up. One more thing on that, solving the chicken and egg, is also the fact that the headset is the complete solution. It's all there. You don't need a high-powered PC as well. You don't need a monitor. You just get this thing, and it's all there. That solves some of it as well. So I'm quite impressed, but still not enough impressed that this is going to be it.
Yeah. The Quest definitely, onto that last point, was the first time I thought, this is truly going to go mainstream. I'd been interested in VR for a long time, but even with my interest, I was often not using it because I had to like string wires up across my ceiling and boot the computer and try to get to work. And like, it was just a lot of literal overhead, I suppose. And not to mention having to have a big computer. But my Quest, I've taken to bars and coffee shops and just had people like trying them out there. And so they really did solve a lot of that accessibility and price points now down to a console. So that's certainly a lot better. The Game Pass idea is interesting. I like you were saying, it's kind of like Amazon Prime, where like, all right, you've got Prime subscription, now you also get Prime Video and Prime Music, and I guess Prime Music's not included, but just sort of expanding the value of the core subscription, and then everyone pulled up Prime Video because now you got a ton of content there. I guess the challenge here is that you're not getting any new content from it. This is all stuff that you could just be playing on your computer or on your Xbox. And then, VR it's very isolating. You can't see anything around you. You can't really share it with people. And I feel like that is something I'm okay dealing with in order to experience some of the really good VR content. But to just do I'd rather be playing on a Steam Deck or something than a giant VR screen, just because it just feels a lot more like I'm still in the real world. And so if it were a bunch of really great killer apps, if it were like all Steam VR games now suddenly worked on Quest or something like that, could make a big difference. But yeah, I'm a little skeptical about how well this is going to work. And also a little surprised is Microsoft still doing the HoloLens? Like, weren't they?
I haven't heard about that in a long time.
Okay. I mean, it's just like, if they were working on their own kind of VR, AR stuff, it'd be interesting to see if this was sort of a predecessor to, them giving up on that and moving over to supporting Quest Pro or something.
But maybe it's not a threat because they're like, well, this is just a giant screen with our things on, so it's fine.
Well, they've gone into partnership, right? This was the big announcement.
Yeah, it is a partnership.
Yeah, and I think the interesting bit of this story is that partnership, in the sense that Quest might have found out that they can't sell it as a gaming, peripheral to consumers, but they're looking at this business opportunity now where virtual meetings and everything like that. I don't know if anyone saw Carmack Unplugged, it was called, which was sort of on the launch day. It was 2 hours of John Carmack in Meta virtual world on the VR headset, just talking about what they'd done and everything. And he, he's a very interesting technical guy. Didn't no holds barred, basically. And you could see these sort of people watching, and it was live and everything was unscripted. And I could see the value there, right? I could imagine going to see a famous CEO and watching them in a sort of VR with attendance, like an Apple event. Let's assume I went there and I'd be in attendance. I could walk into a room and watch the keynote. I could walk out and I could demo in VR their new devices. Definitely in the future. I'm not saying in the next year or two, but that's, I think, more where they're pushing towards, like reality gaming. Reality non-gaming, where the interests and the ideas of putting on your Quest are to be involved in a social environment, there, and that felt very interesting to me.
Yeah, some people don't buy it, but I feel like there is a possibility there. Like, we've just been through this whole thing of the pandemic, of not seeing anyone and doing on-calls, and then getting back into offices and seeing each other again. Oh, how much better this is. And like, okay, but exactly why is it better? And how much of that could you solve with a VR headset? And I feel like it is less than people think. Like, for example, I think eye contact and exactly how that works is tremendously important. Okay, and so the MetaQuest Pro has eye tracking. Right, okay, so maybe you start to solve that problem a little bit. I feel like you could get a long way towards that. And sure, when you're talking about a $1,500 headset, immediately you're sounding like you're talking to businesses anyway.
Yeah.
So just possibly that makes sense.
Yeah, my only concern about this potential feature is accessibility, because I know quite a lot of people cannot use the VR headsets.
Right.
So
like we saw this before with the Nintendo 3DS, right? Had 3D capabilities, and then I believe the way it went was they said, "Oh, okay, no, nobody's allowed to use the 3D in a way that matters to gameplay, because then we've lost the accessibility thing." And you're like, "Okay, well, what are we doing now then?" Okay,
yeah, well, they had that whole
little slider. You
slider.
just turn it off.
Yeah. How much 3D? Like all the dimensions.
The 3D part looks like more of a problem than an opportunity, right? Like, again, another chicken and egg problem, 3D in cinemas, right? They took a massive go at it. Okay, we're making the films in this way, we're projecting it in this way, we're doing the glasses, we do the whole thing, and it was pretty big for a while, and still it's like, nah, not really. Yeah.
I think Meta should take more reference from Peloton. I think their business model could look more towards highly expensive hardware that's specialized with a subscription model to an environment where people come together to do something. Now, obviously, Peloton's all about fitness, and I think that's a very good one. You've got competitive levels, that that hardware all links in. I don't know if any of you ever do cyclocross or CrossFit, where you're on the bike and your RPMs are all being competed. It's a lot more interesting than just going to the gym. And I think what Peloton did do well at first is they had these bikes which were expensive, but you joined because you wanted to be part of this community that helped you feel or realize your fitness goals. And in the sense, like VR, owning that VR headset could be along with this subscription, where that subscription could then pay for Meta to fund a load of free games, a load of free events, like music sort of venues where you could come and watch a live act, but you have to be paying that subscription and you have to have the headset. But once you're in there, it's a free environment. So that feels to me better than, say, the App Store model, where they're sort of saying, oh, anyone can put anything on it. Then you pay this little bit extra, and they haven't got a quality bar in the same way as Peloton had, or quality bar in the same way, say, like Apple Fitness has. So yeah, I think that subscription model should be the way they go.
But if we're talking, sorry, I know we need to go to the last topic of today. If we're talking about accessibility, is paying 30% to the app stores a lot? It does feel like a lot, and yet it's a barrier to access millions of people who everyone owns a smartphone. You just get access to the audience. So you're paying a fee to get access to the audience. But when we look at a high luxury product, because this is a luxury product, and Peloton's stock is tanking because they have high production costs and they have low retention. It's not about Peloton, so I won't go into it. It just shows how that model can be quite fragile when compared to just try to get your product to as many people as you can with a lower barrier of entry.
But what do you think the only comeback would be? That the hardware, right? So a phone, they did a interesting thing where phone dynamics just got so cheap that everyone had one. And then you're right, like the App Store became important because everyone's there. But with VR, at least, I know, one of the main barriers for me, I just haven't bought it because it's expensive and I don't see the value. So if I can drive the value of that cost with a premium subscription that I want to be included, maybe it could work to bootstrap it, and then maybe, cost dynamics change over time.
Because you can sell the hardware at a loss even.
To get or cheaper. Yeah.
Which is what Sony and Microsoft, I think, usually did with their consoles, right? At least when it was first launched, they would sell it for less than it cost them, make up for it in royalties and first-party games, and then over time, it's going to become cheaper. So it's also a bit of a bet on just kind of the future of tech and pricing. But I think so. You weren't saying that they should be increasing their prices and aiming to more in the $1,000 range. Is that right for Meta, or is that what you were thinking?
I'm thinking that they can go for the Quest Pro is $900, right? I believe somewhere around that. So they've already pushed that barrier up for this very powerful piece of kit. But what I think the Peloton bike did, right, and that's what I meant, is they attached that to this subscription service, and then when you were in that subscription, the bike excelled. It had all these extra features, and the community had all this ongoing elements, and it felt very curated. And if you've ever used a Peloton, you're like, it's much better than any other bike, but it's damn expensive. So I wonder whether that could be a route in where this sort of subscription gains you all this access within this VR world that Meta has curated, rather than it being third party, where it's, drop in, drop out, load up an app. It's completely different look and feel and everything like that.
We have to go into the last topic for today.
Let's do it.
Anthony.
Okay. So the last topic is kind of a two-parter. There's been a little bit of voice acting drama recently in games and movies. So, one to mention is that the Mario movie they released the trailer recently, and I think everyone was a little surprised to hear that Mario is Chris Pratt, and really just sounds like Chris Pratt. And this is really surprising. Charles Martinet has been playing the voice of Mario for like 30 years or something. And so everyone was wondering why not go with the actual voice of Mario? So there's a lot of drama around that, and potentially dig into that. But then also just recently, there's been drama around Bayonetta 3, where the original voice actor, who is Helena Taylor, did not renew with them for the third in the series. And I think the game is going to come out like in a week or something. And just a few days ago, she put up this series of videos saying that they had offered her an insulting amount of money, something like $4,000 for the whole role, and that, kind of appealing to fair pricing and treating voice actors, better. And so Jennifer Hale, who was the voice of Shepard in Mass Effect, among many others, ended up being hired for it. And, she's kind of historically been a big workers' rights activist. And so it was kind of interesting that she went in despite this question about pay. But now Bloomberg has come out and done some research, and it sounds like maybe Helena Taylor was offered quite a bit more than she was representing. So there's all of this question around those. So I think actually, let me stop there for a second, and then I'll go into the AI side. But just curious as to what thoughts are around voice actors. I have not worked with a voice actor in a game before, so I'm not as familiar with that world. But there's a lot of passionate people out there about this right now.
Well, I mean, right away it makes me think. I think it's probably the least interesting part of it, but that paradox of choice between the authentic or very best voice for the character versus a famous person that you're going to get people in the door just because it's them. Like, that's been going on years and years and years, right? Like Disney having this debate, Robin Williams is the genie, and he said, no, but you can't make me the main thing in promotion, and they found a way to do it. And recently I think they've got really good at actually going the other way. There's some really great, casting calls and finding the perfect voice for a character. That's amazing. They're going straight to Disney Plus, so you don't know what the box office effect is anyway. But yeah, that tension is always there. It is not going to go away.
I think it's interesting in this case, though. Like,
Bayonetta.
Mario is a bigger name than Chris Pratt. Like, you've already got all of your IP and your followers and everything. I did see someone post an interesting point, which is that an hour and a half of the kind of squeaky Mario voice might be a bit much. It's a great personality and great character, but you don't usually hear long monologues in that voice.
Yeah. He's almost a silent protagonist as you're playing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So maybe they did some testing and just realized like it's
not going to work.
And that's not what this voice was designed for. It was, designed for quick little snippets. And Martinet's done a fantastic job of that, but maybe that was a big part of it too. I don't know.
Well, do you think Mario is an interesting voice as well? Do you think the voice actor of Mario is a single person, or is it multiple people over all the years?
I think it is a single person. You can see like he's probably in his like late 50s now or 60s. But I saw an interview with him, and he talked about how they had approached him, way back when to do it. They may have had someone else filling in occasionally, but my understanding is that he's been the majority of that character over the, I guess, was it Mario 64, I think, when they first had the voice.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I shouldn't go into this. It's not really the topic here. I think my main issue with voice acting is that you also need to have cultural sensitivity. If it's a character that looks in a certain way or comes from a certain background, or you should have a voice actor that matches the character. And it just feels a bit awkward that I don't think Mario was always meant to be, with an Italian voice. But it kind of happened with that way that it has some Italian accents to how people remember and say certain Mario quotes. It just feels a bit odd. Like, why not get a voice actor that's closer to the character? Anyway.
Fair point.
But
So transitioning then, though, this starts to get really interesting right now, one of the biggest topics, probably the biggest topic in tech is AI. And, we're all seeing what's coming out of like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion. And, it's not there yet, but it's definitely coming along rather rapidly. But visuals is certainly not the only place that AI is going to appear and is appearing. And so right now there are services like Replica Studios and Semantic.ai, which do full AI voice acting. So you can type in your text and choose the various voices they have, and then the voices will read them pretty well. You can tell it's not a human, but it's not bad. And I have little doubt that it's going to become almost indiscernible from a human within the next few years. So you have full AI voice acting, and then you have things like voice mod, which will in real time replace your voice. Streamers have a lot of fun with this, but it also means that, I could be Chris Pratt in a movie or sound like Chris Pratt in a movie without actually being Chris Pratt. And so, questions there, like, what is the impact going to be on the, first the voice acting community and those employees, and then, second is like, beyond just sort of replacing voice actors, if that's what we want to do, like what else could AI voices actually add to games? Were kind of like the two big questions I had.
Well, if we look at the cost of creating a deep world that feels real, we once discussed here on the podcast, I believe it's called In-World AI. It's a company that's fully focused on building AI NPCs that feel real to populate digital worlds that are expansive with lower dev cost. And this is where I see it coming into play, because hearing someone in a game say something to you in a voice is a completely different level of immersion as having, Final Fantasy times a pop-up that has a lot of letters to read, but that has a huge amount of cost to develop. And even if you're walking through a sprawling city and you're going through a bustling market, you want to hear the little voices having all of these discussions. Again, that comes with a cost. So I see that this is a potential of AI.
I'd love it to come to indie games, because I love indie games. That's what I do a lot. And always the voice is the bit where it's like, I just read this and there's some noise, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. Like Outer Wilds, absolutely amazing game. And then just weirdly silent, there's just this text with this character now. Okay, well, they're aliens, they're probably not speaking English. But the idea that could become cheap and anybody could put it in, yes.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Because that's it. It's a price thing, right? From an indie game perspective, one of the first things to cut back on is voice. And even, even from the size of the creating the files, it is also a lot of headache, it's like WAVs, what formats and things. I know that when I've been looking at adding voice, and I sort of work with a few voice actors, we have gone with cheaper ones who are sort of like a company, and they might have one guy who will do 5 voices for you, and just read various scripts. And they added a lot better than having no voices, but we had to definitely look at our pricing and just sort of see what we could afford. So I think AI immediately comes in for definitely those unknown voices, sort of surroundings, or a shop seller, maybe it just comes in. But if it's a lead character, I would imagine people might start to take issue with that. A little bit like when we had the Mid-Journey winning the art contest. What if we have an AI character created that is completely made up and people love her or him? Then I think it's sort of you're brushing that barrier again. So I've been looking. I did a quick bit of research about the legality here. So, if you are impersonating someone, so if I could do an accent of Samuel L. Jackson, I am not. There's nothing Samuel L. Jackson could do about that. I'm standing here making his voice with my voice, recording it. I could say anything. The only thing that I can be in trouble for is if I make a defamatory comment. So if what I say, the words that I say, are bad towards Samuel Jackson, then that creates a legal issue. But the fact that I'm impersonating him has no issue. I could say complete nonsense, like reading a shopping list is Samuel Jackson, and there'd be no recourse. So I wonder if that's true from an AI perspective, because an AI isn't actually impersonating, they are making or creating the sound. Therefore, and are they responsible? You can ask an AI. I think there's a really good example here of Joe Rogan meets Steve Jobs, where there's a podcast, a 20-minute podcast, and I recommend listening to it, where they both sound like the two characters, Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs, but the content, the words that have been said were made up. Nothing was recorded or taken. The whole interaction, what they talk about, is an AI just generating it. And then, is that impersonation? That's just creation, right? Again. And I believe that sets a lot of minefields, basically, from a legal perspective.
There's a question I don't know the answer to on that might be related. What we're about, I think. But it was quite recently that James Earl Jones sold, right, or signed off the rights to do the Darth Vader voice to a voice AI company, I think. And I was like, did he have to do that, or could they have just done it? So is it different when it's a character's voice that you're impersonating versus a real person? Real person, no recourse. Character's voice, is that owned? That was very unclear to me.
I wonder if it's like a training based thing. Like they can use his real voice to train, because if you're training off of a voice, then you're sort of like remixing samples in a way. Like it's messy, but you could at least, I think, argue that. Whereas, if you're just synthesizing it and it just sounds really, really close, but you built it from scratch, I mean, it'd be like, just sort of figuring out the recipe to Coca-Cola. Like I don't think they can sue you if you just happen to make something that tastes really, really similar, as opposed to actually like stealing the recipe and using that. I mean, lots of interesting legal side. I was remembering Red Dead Redemption 2. I was trying to remember the number and I found it. They had 700 voice actors in that game.
Wow.
And an additional 500 motion capture actors. I think they were like the number one employer of actors for a few years in Hollywood. In terms of scale and scope and everything, to be able to have all but like maybe the top few, like I think your point was interesting. Like if we may want the top couple of characters, like maybe Joel and Ellie in Last of Us are still voiced by humans who can add like just that extra bit of emotion, like a human piano player versus a AI piano player. But if it's not one of the lead characters, I have to think that all of those other ones are going to start being AI voiced. I mean, not only is it cheaper, but I mean the ability to go in and adjust a line of dialogue late or rearrange. I think. Oh yeah, it wasn't. I think they changed the name of one of the cities in Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but for some reason a city had to be changed, and they had to go back and get, I don't remember how many voice actors to re-record all of their lines that had the name of that city in it. Whereas if you were using AI, that'd be, find, replace, you're done. So it, beyond even just cutting out the cost of the human side, the development time and flexibility is just tremendous how much of a difference that is.
I'm not sure we'll get to a point where actors for the main characters or the characters that have most impact in the game will ever be substituted by AI, because AI is very weak. Machine learning is very weak in understanding emotions, and the relationship with the voice actor and the characters, you have to cross that bridge between the emotion that they're trying to portray in game and how the actor is, doing the voice acting. And if you're working with an AI, you can't have a conversation really with AI and say, oh, just, put more power and emphasis and more emotion into that.
You're going to turn a dial, right?
You
Like
have what little dials
emotion
of
dial. Yeah.
frustration, anger,
Wow.
love, and
I don't think that's inconceivable, though. I feel like
That's my
that
cat.
could be. Oh, there we go. I wonder what that noise was. It's generally not gone well, I would say, to bet against AI. It's generally surprising us. I was thinking about this in terms of why even get Chris Pratt? You could just do an AI Chris Pratt. But it's one thing to read something in a voice. It's another thing, again, to do their choices of how to do that line and the comic timing and all of these things that makes an individual successful.
Yeah.
An AI that just replicates their voice is not going to do that. But right, well, what if it could? Let's get sci-fi, right? What if an AI voice could do it and could do the comic timing better?
Well, definitely.
Is that inconceivable?
No,
Right?
Listen to this Joe Rogan, Steve Jobs podcast. They can do it. They get the essence of the voice and it comes across in the podcast. It's ever so slightly, uncanny valley where things are a bit weird, but at its core, it's a realistic tone and focus. What I actually thought, because I've been doing AI artwork, so I've just been learning on it, and I think what AI could be used for is to generate a vast array of sentences that you could then listen back to and pick through what you like. So what AI is very good at is just quantity. It can crack out lots of things, but it's not always getting it right. But certain times it just gets it perfect, and you can pick through that. So I could imagine a contract being given to a voice actor to say 100 sentences that, hit all these key tones. They give the rights to a character for, I don't know, some amount of money. Then the team uses that to generate an AI that they then script. And then they send all the scripted vocals back to the voice actor who listens. And if he doesn't or she doesn't like them, would re-record that one sentence and send it back. Essentially speeding everything up, allowing the team to get what they need to done, giving the voice actor, credit and credibility for creating the voice in the first hand, and then giving the voice actor the right to give back their voice as they see fit. Now, that might sound, you're undercutting the voice actor's time. Well, what happens if the voice actor could now work with even more studios, do even more characters, provide even more feedback? They only have to read 100 lines. Think of it that way round. Then as a voice actor, I'm now 100 voices in this at the same amount of time as it's taken me to do, maybe one game. So that's where AI in my head starts to work. Now, it's not there right now, but it's happening so fast.
It's just an example of this thing that's the real ideal for me. I think it's not naive that the very best stuff is going to be AI computers working with humans together.
Yeah.
You get that cooperation working, right? You got it at the best. Apparently, it's even really good in chess, which surprises me. I think, just to go ahead and make a huge bold bet, right? This is what I'm saying. It goes all the way out. Let's say, where are we now? Okay, 2036, Disney Plus. Watch any film with any actor in any role that you want. That's what happens.
I think just when we discussed about DALL-E and Midjourney and in the art pipeline of game development, I think you can take 80% to be AI time, but you'll still need a 20% to take it to the finish line with the humans. So you'll accelerate your development, you'll reduce your costs, but maybe you need one actor who's doing the emotion and the intonation and sorry, I lost the word. But then the AI can do multiple voices, so you can have one person doing all the kinds of voices that you need. If we're talking about AI being able to portray emotions accurately, I think at that point we're talking about the singularity potentially, and I think we're still far away from that.
But it doesn't know emotions. It just knows it's accurately represented what you've told it to do. So yeah. I feel that's where it doesn't know what it's doing, and it's always a curation process. So I've always felt AI now has the idea generation down. It can do everything so much, but it still can't curate correctly. Like if you ask an AI, write 100 sentences, pick your most emotive sentence, there's no way it could understand that concept. But you could ask a human to go through this 100 AI sentences, pick the most emotive one, and you would get in the top 10, I would imagine, with a lot of different checks. So it is a tool. AI is a tool. How you utilize that tool, you have to have innovative ways, but the humans who understand that in their industry, and I think this is really important, it's very industry specific. I can see in game design AI being really useful, balancing, testing, even playthroughs or run-throughs of level designs. And I might be taking somebody's job in some sense, like there's a level designer who already is doing that, but I'm not taking away the creative side or the emotive side. I'm taking away the brute force checking of levels, the brute force creation of playing 100 levels with this tank and what's the balance of the damage. So that's difficult, but good companies will see and leverage that to an advantage in their niche. And I think that's important, that we're still in that niche phase for AI, and figuring out how to apply it to that niche is where the value is.
I think this is a really good point to wrap up today's episode, because from what I've seen, AI in a topic could be discussed in a full roundtable, and we've started to see a lot more content around this. So it's such an interesting topic to dive into.
Yeah.
If you want to add your ideas to this discussion, you can find us on the Naavik Discord. And thank you all for joining us. Lovely to have you here. We'll see you next week.